Firstly, thank you. Thank you very much for giving me opportunity to interview you for my channels.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me. I've been a fan of your podcast for a long time, so when you asked me, I was honored. Thank you.
So I've gone through your profile. I can see that you are into multiple roles and responsibilities. You're doing different works. So I thought to tell about your work and about you to my audience.
Yeah, that sounds great.
So can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. My name is Keith Atherton. I've been a software developer and architect for over 20 years. I've worked in many different sectors, many different companies during that time throughout the UK, lived in the US for a few years as well. So yeah, it's been quite varied. It's been things either using .NET, lots of database things like SQL Server and Oracle. And in recent times, I've been using lots of things like Power Platform, lots of low code and no code solutions as well. So yeah, been very varied. At the moment, I'm based in Scotland, just outside Edinburgh in Scotland, and I work for a consultancy called Quorum.
So you are doing software development as well as architecture work from long time.
Yeah, that's correct. It's let me see. I think it's been over 22 years now. So I've been doing it for a very long time. It's something I've enjoyed. I've just stuck with. I've always enjoyed the engineering side of things, so I stayed very hands-on. I've done some team leading and some kind of other, sort of leadership type roles along the way. But mostly I do like the hands-on helping people creating solutions.
And what are your favorite projects that you did in this 22 years?
That's a good question. There's been so many. I think the first few. So when I first started working in software development, it was after I finished at university. I joined a consultancy that was based in London. We moved around the UK and created solutions for many different sectors, lots of banks and other things as well. So I think one that stands out is probably the first one that I worked on, which was a big share dealing and wealth management website for a big bank. And that was all brand new to me. When I went to university, I didn't study IT, so I was learning on the job. They gave me training, which was great, but that was good because it was like a trial by fire. It was all new, the words they used, the processes, how they worked through the project, how did we test the software? Everything was so new. So I had this really steep learning curve when I started, it was a bit scary, but it was really fun and interesting to learn lots of new things as well. So I'd probably say that's one of the standout projects for me.
Do you remember the transition coming out from non-technical background and coming into technology for the first time? I'm going a little bit back.
Yeah, I do actually. It was funny. I was talking to someone the other day who I used to work with back on that first job. It was a great company to work for as well. But when I left university, I did a science based degree, so I had minimal IT experience. I did it as hobby, hobby projects, and I knew some coding, some basic coding. But it was funny. It was even things like the words they would use, like to populate a database, like populate. I was kind of having to learn kind of what was standard for people who worked in the industry. But for me, I'm like, oh right, okay, we need to make this code more generic, so there was lots of questions, lots of asking questions and not being afraid to ask the questions. And that was great. There were so many really, really good people that was, they were patient, they were helpful, they were saying, oh, this means that. And here's an example of what I would expect to see from you. So they helped guide me. And it was a really interesting time of becoming part of, the software development world. So yeah, it was fun. I enjoyed it.
Do you remember your first project?
Yeah, so I think the first one I worked on probably was that share dealing website for a big company, a big bank here in the UK. It's a household name here. the company I work for, we worked on one part of that system, but there are actually lots of other companies. I think there was maybe sort of 5 or 6, maybe more companies working on it. Some of them worked with interactions with the bank, with APIs that actually made payments and transactions. We were one that worked on the web development, so we worked on the front end, but also communication with the back end. And again, likewise, there's people who worked on the CRM side of things and lots of other parts. So that was interesting too, working with lots of other people. They were from all over the world. There was a company from Australia, a company from the Netherlands. There's people from everywhere, a couple of companies from the USA. So there was a good experience there of, kind of interacting with other people, being able to work with them, asking the right questions and collaborating with people. So yeah, that was probably the big first project that I had.
So what is the software development life cycle before 22 years and now?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think certainly in the early days for me, which was around 2000 when I started, was lots of waterfall-based projects. We'd have a project plan. Here are the milestones, the usual life cycle that you would expect, where you would gather the requirements first, like a discoverability phase. We'd then see what the best fit technology was. So with that first job at the consultancy, I think they prided themselves on having people who could learn any technology needed. So if they had a client that already used Java and Oracle, okay, folks, you're going on a training course, you'll be using this. It wasn't just everything .NET, .NET, .NET. It was what the client had or what would be the best fit, or we need cross-platform. Let's think about this and this and this. Budget requirements might mean using open source or other things as well. So it kind of varied. But yeah, in terms of the way we worked, I'd say very waterfall. It was very broken down into phases, present those deliverables. This was, the days before the broadband has the speed it has these days. We didn't really do remote working. It was all in person based, in offices and on the client site in their office too. But these days they're certainly more familiar using like an iterative process like Agile, something that can work well, maybe not all the time, but on many projects. If keep giving that feedback very regularly, keep closing the loop, get the customer's feedback so far, any changes needed, any change to the requirements. That approach seems to work well very often, I would say.
So understanding the so different and diverse projects that you did, how software is helping human to solve his problems?
There are so many, I think there's so many ways that there could be solutions that help people. And, I'm sure like you, there's lots of podcasts and other things that I listen to keep up to date with technology news. There's some great ones on the BBC, like the Tech Tent and Click and many others out there as well. And it's great when you hear about how solutions are created, sometimes not even within the UK. So I'd hear about how things are created in, many places in Africa or India or many other places where, hey, this is helping people, whether it be transferring money, whether it be helping people manage their own money, or having better connectivity to, be able to, manage whatever they need for their business, or, if they're farming or whatever the case may be. There's so many ways that it can help people, and sometimes often simple solutions, using things like Raspberry Pis with sensors and listening to things. So I think in terms of the world as a whole, there's so many great solutions and things are improving really, really well. Technology can be a good enabler, making life easier for many people. But certainly where I'm based in the UK, it could be something as simple, making payments more easy, whether it's, contactless devices to make payments, or using apps. So you've got something on the move, no matter where you are, to do, banking or whatever the case may be. So yeah, I think it's mostly a force for good, and life can be made much more convenient and safer and so on by using technology.
So, what are your toughest phases while working for a software?
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed the first part there.
Do you have any toughest time that you have when working on software? or doing development or any architecture?
Also, when I get started with the new technology.
Yeah, any particular project that made you think so much and you spent a lot of time in understanding it?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a good point. I think in recent times I've been using the Power Platform a lot, and that really made me think in a different way when I was using it, and I've been a really big fan of it. So for many years, I'd say that I was more writing code from the ground up. So I'd be using .NET. A long, long time ago, I'd be using Visual Basic 6, other languages as well, sometimes C or C++. And I've been so used to kind of following getting started guides, writing things from the ground up, creating the user interfaces, building everything almost from scratch or using some libraries. But when I use the Power Platform, let's say particularly with Power Apps to create apps, and again, there's many other parts of the platform like Power Automate, Power BI, and so on. But when I've been using that, I've been using a different mindset. I've been using code that is not it's not designed to be used object oriented. It's not designed to be used quite the same way as say a typical fourth generation programming language like C# might be used. So I've had to kind of come up with workarounds and different solutions and getting it to work the way I need it in different ways. Even today, even this morning, I've been using it for something like how do I make reusable functions so I'm not repeating myself throughout everywhere. Where using C#, I've done it for years. It'd be really familiar. I'd know straight away what I'd need to do. With this, I'm having to kind of learn a different approach. But that's part of the fun. It's what you make of it, and I take the positive, and I'm enjoying it.
And why software development is changing?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a really good one because I think there's so many factors. I think these days we've got more processing power to hand. The use of computers is much more popular. So many more people have them. So many people have mobile devices, which just wasn't a thing many years ago. So it's like the ecosystem is changing, and there's more processing power in our hands that we can carry with us. I think there's a big move to things moving towards the cloud, not for everything, but for many things it's moving to the cloud, or maybe the services we use, whether it be Netflix or some other service, the cloud could be used under the hood there behind the scenes. So I think that is changing the ecosystem, how we develop things. Is that an option, or do we keep things on premise for a customer? We can carry an app with us, but now it's powerful, so we can actually do banking and again, more valuable things with an app rather than just play a basic game or something. It's really powerful stuff. And I think as well, a lot of people, because of the pandemic and many other reasons, the remote working, being able to remote from any location. I do have friends who, I've got a friend who's freelance, and he's like, I might just live in Spain for a month. I mean, it's good for him. That must be nice. But yeah, I think I'll live in Florida for a month. He can move about, but he's got such a fast broadband connection. He can do his work and connect to the client almost anywhere in the world, anywhere he needs to. So that's, again, that's an attractive thing for many people, I think.
So what you like personally working on a software?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think for me, I've learned over the years, the biggest thing for me is helping people. I've always enjoyed helping people, and often it's software as a way to create a solution for them. Not always a website, not always an app, but it could be something, that just automates something for them, or it saves them time, or it saves them money, or makes them money. And I've done that with consultancy over the years, as well as working within companies within an IT department, trying to help that business being focused on one business, one organization. So I think the main thing is because I'm I think like you, a people person at heart. I love dealing with people, love meeting people, speaking with people. I think that's the main attraction for me. I just love meeting new people, trying to help them where I can, working with others, learning from others. I love learning as well. So that's the main thing for me.
So what is the way you look at any problem that you face?
That's really good because I think it can vary for many people. It can be very different. But for me, sometimes it can be a small project. Recently I worked on like a single page web application, very straightforward, just a grid, a couple of buttons, your kind of standard stuff. That was a fairly quick job. And other things, I've been on projects that could last for months, lots of different forms, database, lots of different moving parts. And I think for me personally, when I'm faced with any challenge, particularly a big challenge, is really just to break it down into manageable parts. So I'm working on now, it might be 20 forms, 20 screens or more. There's a database, there might be 30 or more tables and stored procedures or whichever technology that I'm using. So I think for me, breaking it down into manageable pieces, breaking it down, um, working through them one by one, and then you can see the progress you make as you work through them as well. Um, I think that's a way that works really well, and it helps prevent getting overwhelmed with things as well. But it also helps with the design and the architecting. If I can break down things into smaller parts, I can maybe start seeing where things could be reused throughout a solution. Or, there's some dependencies. I need to do this part before this part. So often breaking things into smaller parts really helps.
Which one you like, doing architecture or development?
Oh, okay. Tough question. I really enjoy both. It's a good question there because for me, the way I've done architecture is it's come later on in my career. I started off as a developer, sometimes worked on things, didn't ask too many questions. It was very clear from the requirements what I needed to do. But as I've gotten older, I've asked more questions. I've created my own solutions, sometimes outside of work as side projects or fun things. And I've learned then that, I really like designing the whole system. I like seeing how everything works. How does it help an organization? Is it intuitive and easy to use? I kind of like those bigger user experience questions. So for me, I feel they really do go together very well, hand in hand. And for me, being a developer has been invaluable to be an architect. Otherwise, it might just be a theoretical exercise. It might be, oh yeah, sure, I use A, B, C, and D, but unless you've actually used them and found if they're buggy or difficult or there's compatibility issues, it's kind of valuable to know the developer side. Um, so I think for me, if I really had to choose, I would probably choose development, but they're both so closely connected. It's very difficult to choose.
And engineering and talking with people. What is the difference that you understand and how it is able to make your problem to solve?
Yeah, that's a good one because I think talking with people, you know, it's the people who need the solutions. It's the people who often request the solutions or ask for help. Sometimes they ask for a specific solution, but when you actually learn about the requirements, it's maybe not the solution they thought it might be. And I quite enjoy that as well. I've had that before with a customer where I was trying to help them and they were quite technical minded as well. They'd used lots of apps and games and software and they were really helpful. They even drew out, I want it to look like this with a grid and I want a button here and this. And the way they explained it is, I'll do this bit manually, then I'll use this new app and then I'll do this manual part. And I remember working with them and looking at, okay, can you just show me what you do here? And I shadowed them. I watched what they did, asked lots of questions. What's this? What's that? And then realized even the manual parts could be put into an automatic solution for them. That would save them even more time. So it was a good win for them. They were really happy. But often talking to the people to see what they needed, I attempt to have good communication skills as well. Again, talking with them, trying to find out what their goal is, what their aim is. Again, that solution might be part one of many for one big solution. Like, we can help with that. We can do something different for this. So I think dealing with people is critical. I think that's at the core for me. And then the engineering is equally valuable because it's useful to know what tools you've got in the toolbox to help someone. Before I knew about the Power Platform, which I love using now, it would always be written from the ground up. So I may create something using .NET for a web app, but it could take me twice as long, maybe longer, than a Power App might take me. But now I know I have this tool in the box. This can be a good fit for certain projects. So I think they're both very valuable, but they both have their place as well.
If we see in last 12 years or 10 years, there is rapid growth in technology. So as a developer, as an architect, uh, if you compare your mindset before 10 years and now, so what is the change that you are observing and how you are thinking now?
Yeah, really good one. I think some of the things we touched upon earlier, which is, how it's changed maybe over the 20 years with, recent years, we've got things moving to the cloud. We've got mobile devices with a lot more power in the mobile devices, which is important too. As well as being portable, it's capable of so much more as well. This is maybe a cliche as well, but I think things like artificial intelligence, I think, it's very topical at the moment with things like ChatGPT, and, AI generated artworks and so on and so on. But I think AI, there's so much possibility. There's obviously risks involved as well. But I think the ways whether it can be recommending things or making predictions or automating tasks, I think there's really going to be a lot of power in that, and it's going to be very, very powerful going forward. But I think again, recent years with more powerful processing, devices and new techniques, that AI would really, it's really going to grow going forward, I think.
Is it easy to do architecture for any business?
It can vary. Actually, really can vary because there are so many factors involved that I find. Yeah, I really enjoy it because, again, I like seeing the high overview, and I also really like the business side of things. I like seeing how organizations run, how people get value, what's useful to people, what could be reused between different teams and departments. I kind of like seeing that holistic, high-level view. When it comes to architecture, I think there's so many factors of what does the client need? Um, what tools do the client already have? It may be that they've already invested in a certain cloud platform like AWS. Again, after watching many of your podcast episodes, I know you've got skills and experience with AWS. So maybe hey, we've got this, we want to use AWS, but we want to use this language, or we have an existing website, but we need to extend it. So it really could be what do they have? What do they need? Do they start with something new, or are we adding to what they currently have? How many people are involved? How technical are they? So I think there's so many different factors, but often working with people, I've been very lucky. I've worked with lots of really great people, lots of clients who have been very open and willing to working with me and my team. That I've never really, it's very rare that there's a challenge or it's a struggle because they want your help and I'm there to help them. So it's, that often helps sometimes more than the technical challenges, that me and them have the right attitude to work together. So yeah, I think it really can vary, but just the more you learn about what they need, who they are, what they already have, and what you can bring to the table, then you start seeing solutions arise from that. And then you can start talking with them, working with them like, oh, how about this? No, no, no. Okay, how about that? How about if we use this and this? And then it naturally comes together.
So how these leadership qualities came in you? You are a developer talking with the machine always, but talking with people is something completely different from doing engineering. So how you are able to gain that skill and how you are able to understand the business side of the technology?
Yeah, that's a good question. For most of my career, I've been hands-on engineer. I've done some team leading, I've done some recruiting, lots of coaching. I'm very lucky at the moment. I mentor a couple of people as well, which is something I really love doing. I love seeing people grow and develop. I think, I agree as well. Dealing with people, dealing with the technology, it's two different things. I think the thing that's really helped for me, and it's something that I've improved over the years, I like to think, has been that I try and empathize with people. I try and see where they're coming from, what their perspective is. And sometimes with the different, companies I've worked for and the different countries I've moved between, I've been quite lucky to see lots of different perspectives, people with different attitudes. Some could be more positive than others. But often many people want help. They're there because they want a solution, they want help. So the main thing for me is really to see what help do they need, where are they coming from, what challenges do they have, what are they struggling with. Sometimes, sometimes it could be people who maybe not technical. So one example, I worked with one company, and they were working in a big workshop making many different big things, but they didn't really use computers very often. They didn't know how to use it. So one thing for me is just understand their perspective of, okay, well, we need a user experience that's easy for someone who may not even own a computer. They might have a smartphone, but that's all they may have. They might not be used to using the mouse, clicking and dragging and doing things like this. So for that perspective, the main thing for me was to understand where they're coming from, what capabilities do they have, do we need like user guides or messages that make things very clear. So I think that's the thing that's helped me one of the most, is to understand where people are coming from and how can I help them the most.
You are the evidence for the technology evolution. How things have been changed in years. So how and why today software became a very important thing for a human being everywhere on this planet?
Yeah, that's a really good point, because again, there's so many ways that technology can help people all over the world, and many people based in different locations or different economies or different ways of living. As you say, it can help people in so many different ways when it's used the right way and it's used for good. And I think there's so many ways, we mentioned again, whether it's mobile devices, it can be portable, it can use to transfer money, make payments, make life easier, maybe in places where, having credit cards is not a normal thing, but in the UK, it typically is a common thing. So I think it can help in so many ways. And I think, again, in recent years with the development of things like cloud technologies, AI, there's a lot more frameworks like JavaScript frameworks and things for making web apps. There's a lot of ways that can make life easier. Instead of building it from scratch, you could maybe use a framework to help you get there. Instead of writing something from code, you could maybe use a no-code, low-code option like the Power Platform. So I think things like that means that you don't always need years of coding experience to be able to get started. It's quite accessible. In fact, many people who use Power Platform have been career switchers. They've come from different backgrounds like accountants or, doing other non-technical jobs, moving into technical jobs, first to help them with their job, to automate things. But then actually some of them have become to be a maker or a developer full time. So I think, there's so many ways it can help people. Yeah.
Uh, is it easy for you doing architecture because you might have worked with different tools and technologies? You know what works and what matches with the requirement. Because with the vast experience that you have, can I say you can solve any software problem?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not sure about any software problem, but what I've always enjoyed doing is, again, this varied experience I've had is, there's good and bad no matter whatever journey you take. Whether you come from, for me, I came from university. I had a physics degree, and then I moved into IT. But having that science background gave me a different perspective, perhaps, than many people who'd studied IT. there's pros and cons with both. Again, the people I mentioned there using the Power Platform, they come from many different backgrounds, different careers. Then many moved into IT and still are doing that. Again, they'll have different perspectives, that they'll have experience of doing that job, coming from that background, working in that industry. So for me, I've made it work for me. I've taken the positive of, well, I've had this varied experience. Here's how I can join it together. In terms of solving any problem, often I come across, similar kind of software problems, or we need a new solution. Now and again, there'll be something totally unique. So there was something I worked on a couple of years ago, which was like a load balancer. It needed lots of maths. There was an algorithm to kind of distribute things and send things down a supply chain. That was a new thing to me. I'd not done that before, but it meant that two things I did. One, I'd used the experience I had. Well, I know all these different technologies and different databases, and I'm constantly learning. I don't know it all. I don't think anyone would. There's just so much out there. But okay, for the tools I know, what could be useful? Okay, let me read up to see if there are any other tools available. Could I use anything else? Could I use a different language or a different way to implement this? So I think having that broad variety of skills, even if you don't know them all in depth, just having them, being aware of what is possible, what types of databases, what types of languages are out there. Okay, are any of them going to be useful? Okay, I think it might be this one. Okay, I'll study more in depth on that one to learn how to use it, more effectively. So I've often taken that approach, is just to open the toolbox. What can I use? But then I'll need to learn more to use that tool even better than I know it already.
The softwares that you have developed, how it made so many people to use it?
Yeah, that's a really good one. Let me see. There's been so many projects over the years. Let me see. I think one that was valuable, I did work for an organization where they needed something to help people working in a warehouse where products were coming in and products were going out. And the way they used to work, it was a very manual process. They would often have like lots of notepads, and when the stock came in from a van, they would write it. Okay, I've got 20 of these, I've got 100 of these. They would write everything down. It would all be manual. And when they worked in the team within the warehouse, they passed it between everyone. It went back and forth, and like, oh, who's got the paper? I've lost the paper. They'd be all over the place. So one way that was able to help them, and again, I work with a team, so really grateful for great people to work with. But that was a solution that I did design myself. It was a way that it was going to be a tablet device that was portable. And there was a simple app on there. It wasn't too complex, but it helped them keep track of these numbers. It updated different dashboards, different databases in real time with other systems. So they knew exactly what stock was coming in, what's been received, what's still expected. If they need to chase up the supplier, say, well, we're missing these, where are they? They had all that knowledge and all those, all that data immediately ready to go. It was very fast, very easy to use. And again, it was mostly non-technical people using it, but it was easy enough that they could use it. They didn't need to read a big user manual. It was very clear, very straightforward, and they were very happy, and it made their life much easier. So I was very proud of that project.
Is it not intimidating for you to adopt to the new projects or new business models that you see? Not now, before.
Yeah, that's a great question. It's a really good question. I don't think people speak up enough about that, actually. That, as you say, it can be intimidating. It still can at the moment. But certainly when I was younger, again, when I started, I didn't come from IT, so it was all new. Even the way they would design a system with a database and the way it would all connect, whether it be tiered or microservices, everything was new. Oh, wow, what is this? How does this work? How does it talk? So it was then. It was then for the technology. It always can be for the let's see, the industry as well. You mentioned there. So if you go to many industries, that many of them have their own acronyms or jargon or words. So if you work in the finance industry, whether it's dealing with portfolios, wealth, you can use different codes, different ways of speaking, yield curves and portfolios and all kinds of things. It can all be brand new. So I think your question before about how to deal with a big challenge is a good way to face it. Is that if you take a moment to read up on it and understand it, if you can break things down into smaller things, if you ask lots of questions or read up on, oh, I heard them say a word there, but I don't know what that means. I'll just go and research that. I think things like that, breaking it down, try to get an understanding, trying to take your time as well, not get overwhelmed, which can be easier said than done. It can be difficult sometimes when you're faced with a big challenge of like, wow, there's a tight deadline. They need it now. I don't know what this means. But again, just communicating well with people, saying, look, I don't know what this means. Can you explain it? Or if it's something more challenging than you first thought, like, oh, I thought this was a week. It's going to take longer. I'm just going to raise it with you. I think this will take longer. Can I get some help? Or here's why it's going to take longer. And just being open. It's not always easy, but it's certainly well worth it.
So from that intimidation stage to now simplifying problem into multiple things. So can this possible? Can this be possible in directly coming and coming into IT and watching a software how and watching the mechanism of it? Is it possible to understand and simplify things without experience?
I think so. I think obviously the experience helps, but everyone has to start somewhere. So I think, like you do with the, studying with the exams, and me too. I try and take Microsoft exams and many others as well. I'm always learning something new, whether it's LinkedIn Learning, which is a favorite for me, a plural site. YouTube has lots of great content as well. So I think even if you don't yet have the experience, what you're doing is great. Ask people with experience, people in the industry. Do you know anyone? Can you reach out if you follow people online? Like there's many people I follow online for, who work at Microsoft, or they do great tech community work like Gregor Suttie and John Lunn. But there's so many people, I can't mention them all. I'll just go and ask and say, oh, I saw your blog post. That looked great. Could you tell me more? Are you free for a call? Can we have a chat? So even if I've not got experience yet, I find that I can learn. I can maybe follow tutorials myself, get started and just try and use things myself. And then that will help me to get the understanding so I can break things down into smaller parts. But even if you don't have, so that's a big help. But even if you don't have the experience, let's say if someone gives you a task, we need this, here's 3 parts. Even just looking at the 3 parts, okay, part 1, where do I start? Okay, I need to read up to understand what does that mean. Okay, part 2, let me try a tutorial to try and use it. I'll use it on my PC. Does this work? Even taking it slowly, step by step. And it can be a journey. It can be a long journey, but, taking it slowly, taking it steady, that can help, I think.
What are your technical skills with which you can solve technology problems?
Yeah, that's a good one. It's quite varied for me. I've often been called a generalist, which means I'm quite flexible, quite adaptable. I think many people can be. Some people choose to go the specialist route. Let's say someone might choose to be a Kubernetes expert, and then they'll work with that and the ecosystem around it, as well as many other things. But for me, I do have some core strengths, which I would say is probably .NET, C#, databases, particularly SQL Server, and Power Platform, probably Power Platform the most. It's something I use every week, sometimes every day. So that's something that I'm using a lot. So I'd probably say they're the main skills. But over the years, I've done game development using Unity with C#. and many other tools as part of the ecosystem there as well. I've used lots of Azure. I'm using that very often as well. I'd probably say that's one of my core skills as well. More than AWS, I probably use Azure more. I work for a consultancy that's a Microsoft partner, so it is what I would use more often, but not just that. It's not just Azure. Sometimes we use AWS and other things as well. But yeah, over the years, I've used lots of things, whether it be older things like VBA, VB6, VB.NET, which is still widely in use. My first job was using Java, using Oracle database. A few weeks ago, I was using ASP.NET MVC, lots of JavaScript. So really, for me, it really varies. I've probably got lots of many, basic skills in many things, but maybe 3 or 4 core skills.
And what are your people skills, and which is related to business management or understanding the business side of the technology?
Yeah, good question. I think, again, I've always tried to have empathy. I've always tried to understand where people come from. I've always tried to have strong communication skills, and I've always felt that naturally I'm a people person. This is maybe lucky. It's not something I've had to take any courses on or learn. It's just come naturally that I like people. I like dealing with people. I like meeting new people, learning from other people's experiences. That's how I learn. I just ask lots of questions and why did you choose this? And, I noticed you worked there. How did that work? I like all that. But I think over the years that has benefited. If I'm dealing with a team member or my own manager or a client or a prospective client, it's really helped having those strong communication skills, listening from them, letting them speak, asking about their perspective, asking them to show me what they do, asking them what they expect of me or me and my team. And sometimes that has been useful when when I lived abroad, I did actually a lot more recruitment where I'd actually recruit other developers and then I would train them up, get them up and running and then leave them to do the job. And then I would move to a different site and I would move around. But that was useful as well. Like, okay, what skills do you have? Can you show me? And, sometimes they might not be confident to talk about if they had any gaps in their knowledge or they weren't very skilled in an area. But of course, none of us are experts in everything. So, I'm like, well, I'm not great with this and this. What gaps do you have? Can you show me where you need help? And I can try and help. So things like that can often help them, which helps me, helps the organization. So yeah, when I've led teams, it's been a similar thing. How can I help you? What do you need? I'm always open to feedback as well. If someone says, well, I'd rather you did this, or can we catch up more often? Okay, I need help. I want to speak to you more often. So to ask you questions because I need the help. So things like that can often help. Is just trying to get connections with people.
And you're a Microsoft certified software developer.
Yeah, that's right. I have a few now. I've been meaning to get more. I have, at the moment, I've got 6 of the Microsoft fundamental certifications. And again, this is related back to what we talked about, where I like to have like a broad coverage of all the basics of many things. So if a customer comes to me and says, right, I need a Power App, or hey, I need a database, I'm not just focused in one area. I know, I learned something about that a few months ago. Let me just read up on it again. Okay, I have that familiarity. So I'm kind of taking many fundamentals, and then after this, I'm hoping to take maybe some more Power Platform and some more Azure to get the associate and the expert levels and just become more expertise.
So is it possible to become an architect without being a developer?
That's a good question. I think it would be possible. Yeah, I think it would be fine. But I know in my experience, being a developer has been crucial. Like coming from that background of being able to, being able to say, well, I've used that technology, even if I'm not an expert, I've used that technology. I know what's involved. We need to install this, this, this. We need this tool, that tool. It can communicate well with this, but it may struggle with that. Actually being hands-on struggling with the pain points, finding the good sides, what's good, what's bad, what surprises you when you use it, sorry. Things like that are really valuable. So when I've been, doing the architecture or building a design, a specification, then I can say, oh, well, I can then come up with the time estimates a lot more accurately. Because let's say if it's C# and it's a web app and there's a couple of screens, I'm like, okay, this feels about 3 days worth. A lot of that comes from me being a developer, knowing that would take 2 days, 3 days, whatever the case may be. If I was purely an architect, I might need to do more learning to be able to understand how long something would take to build. So I think it's definitely possible. I think it's definitely an option, but I would say that being a developer as well, or being a developer beforehand, is very, very valuable.
That's great. And also, I can see you are a speaker, blogger, instructor, mentor.
Yeah, I keep quite busy. Busy like you, I think. I know you're busy too. Yeah, it's funny because, again, going back to what we said, where I think the main driver for me is being able to help people. Sometimes it can be a new app. Sometimes it can just be a Power Automate flow that just automates a job, or run something at the same time every day. And the way I got into doing this tech community work is I was inspired by many people like Jessica White, John Lunn, Gregor Suttie. Again, there are many, many people that I was inspired. Pete Gallagher does these great presentations with robots and things. I'm like, I want to do that. That looks fun. That looks great. So that's often been the driver for me. It's like, well, that looks good. And then when I was starting with these Microsoft exams, I'd paid for and taken my first fundamentals exam, the AZ900, which is the Azure Fundamentals. Really enjoyed it. Lucky enough to pass. I was like, great, really enjoyed that. And then afterwards, I learned about these Microsoft virtual training days. I was like, oh, I didn't know about that. That would have given me more, something else to study before the exam. It would have given me a better chance. And then I learned about ways you can get discounts on the exam vouchers to save money. And I thought, well, I wish I'd known that first. If I'd known that, I could have saved some money. Next time I'll use that. And I thought I could share that with other people, because I wish I'd known it first. But if I share it with other people, they'll know it. And people who may be struggling with money means, hey, they can now take an exam because you might be able to get your first one for free or for half price. So I thought, here's a way I can help people and try speaking. And if I enjoy it, great. If I don't, I'll stop. I did enjoy it. I started doing more. I'd recently started a blog as well, just not everyone wants to watch videos. Some people prefer reading. So I figured, over time, I've just done more and more, and I enjoy doing it as well. So that's really what keeps me doing it, sharing that information, being able to help people in the same way that people have helped me.
So, what are those qualities that made you become multi-skilled person?
Yeah, that's a good one. I think again because I came from a non-IT background. A lot of that was asking and learning on the job, and learning outside of the job as well. I did go above and beyond and I read up online. I've read books. I watched YouTube videos. I just kept learning, and luckily that's something I've always enjoyed doing. So that's something that I've just continued with to this day. Just keep learning. Keep learning new things that come out, or sometimes learning things that I might not use myself, but I just have an interest of, hey, this thing in AWS looks cool. I might not use it for a few months, or I might never use it, but I still want to learn it because I like learning new things. So I think constantly learning is very valuable. And again, dealing with people, it's always great meeting new people. It's something I enjoy. But again, just asking questions like, oh, if you have time, can you show me this? Or, oh, I heard you mention that. Do you have a link I could read more about this? I want to learn more. So, and other people will then know that, well, you're keen to learn. They might reach out to you. Oh, Keith, I know you know about Power Platform. Can you help me with this? Which is something I even had this morning. Actually, someone reached out to me like, oh, actually, could you show me something with this? Yeah, no problem at all. Always happy to help. So I think, yeah, just keep learning, reading, asking, and doing as well. Doing is important as well. Actually trying things yourself. You learn so much that way.
Do you have anything that is challenging for you in your 22 years of life?
Yeah, I think there've been many challenges over the years. I think some of them have been technical, particularly early on, which is what does this mean? What does DNS mean? What does that mean? How does this language work? You know, some things that were completely brand new. It could be intimidating at first because you think, how do I start? You know, even before Google and, you know, things were very popular, sometimes it would be, you need a book, you need to read up on this. And if there's no one around to ask who's used it, it could be more of a struggle. But these days, there's so much more information out there in so many different ways that I find it, you know, it's quite, there's so many ways that you can learn quite easily, sometimes for free as well. You know, there's so many ways that are easy to get started. So yeah, I don't know if that answers the question.
Yeah, one last question is, I'm sure as an architect, you are seeing and observing and understanding different kind of business uh, problems. So, do you have a specific business problem that you want to solve? If it is, if it is like your goal.
Yeah, that's a good one because again, I've been lucky. So some of the sectors I've worked in have been things like construction, retail, consultancy, which is where I am now, which I've worked for a few, game development as well. That was another interesting one. I think working as a consultant now, one thing I really enjoy as well is the variety, which is one of the reasons that I'm a generalist as well. Or some people might say jack of all trades, you know, lots of small bits of everything. But I like the variety. I think I've had roles before where I've done the same thing every week, or pretty much the same thing, or used the same technology, done a very, very similar thing. And I found that it's not been very challenging for me. And I've not been very fulfilled. I've not found it interesting enough. So for me, I just like that constant variety. But in terms of having a very specific challenge, I think with the consultancy now, I deal with so many different clients in different sectors that fulfills that need for me at the moment. But if I had more time, maybe some more, side projects, maybe doing games again. Game development was fun. I think the thing with games and simulations, they can get very complex, and there's, you know, lots of interesting, challenging problems that you have to solve with them as well. So I think maybe just as a fun side thing, getting back into games, creating simulations, working on those kind of interesting, different challenges to keep me, interested from something different from the day job.
One last question that that actually makes a lot of people to understand, because I'm sure this comes from a lot of experience of yours, understanding about software development. So why Microsoft products are everywhere, and why Microsoft products have a lot of users today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. As you say, there's so many offerings out there. You know, even with cloud technology, you've got AWS, Azure, Google Cloud Platform, many others as well. The same with kind of productivity tools, programming tools, things like Visual Studio, but there's so many different IDEs as well. I think there are a few reasons. So for me personally, I think from my first job was varied. My first job for a consultancy was Java with Oracle. Then there was the preview of .NET. That's how old I am. The preview that came out like 2001, 2002. We was kind of working with that, working with web services and things. So I think for me, my first few jobs in my career were using Microsoft tools. Some of them because they were Microsoft partners at the time as well. So they maybe got good pricing on the licenses, or it was just something they got help and support with. There were reasons they used it. So these were things like SQL Server, VB6, and then .NET. Excuse me. So I think, yeah, the main reason for me is it started that way, but then my experience and skills built that way. So when I was looking for new roles or changed, it was a good natural fit for me to stay within the same ecosystem. So that's probably my personal experience. And then in terms of, I think in recent years with, in general within the market, I think Microsoft have been doing some really good moves in the last few years where they've got, they're encouraging open source. They've got some really good development tools. Visual Studio is still my favorite IDE. I think it's absolutely brilliant. There's so many features. It's so useful, so powerful. They've got low code, no code offerings with a Power Platform. Again, there are many other options out there, but that's one I've started to use and I'm a big fan of. I think they've made it very intuitive. They're supporting it. They keep growing it and changing it. So you can see it's being strongly supported and it's getting a very good uptake as well. And I think with the cloud offering as well, Azure's, one of the big two cloud offerings out there. And I think there's a lot of really good free online learning material through Microsoft Learn. So it's a good way for people to get started and learn more. There's good things with Power Platform like the Power Up program as well for people who want to career switch into it or just learn more. So I think they've really got a good, a good approach. They've got good quality. They get things up there. Sometimes there's good trials or good free offerings as well. Visual Studio Code is another great option as well. So I think, yeah, they've just got really good tools. They often integrate very well with each other, using Azure with the Visual Studio Code and with other things as well. So yeah, I think it's just a really good set of tools and services and some really good learning material with it as well.
So, as an expert, what is your observation about my questioning in this conversation, as well as the work that I did on my YouTube channel?
Well, I've been a fan of your channel for a while, actually, Sai. So I'm definitely a fan. And I wouldn't keep watching if I wasn't a fan. So yeah, keep doing what you're doing. I think it's absolutely brilliant. One thing that I really like with your podcast episodes is that you ask really good questions. I like this approach where we can talk and you can ask questions as we go. But the fact that you've got questions which are different from the usual questions, you dig a bit deeper, or again asking about real life things about what intimidates people. Some people might say expert. I've got lots of experience, but I still get intimidated. Sometimes I see a problem or a specification with a sector that I've not worked in for a while and think, I don't know what that word means. I don't know what this acronym is. I have to then learn more and ask the questions. But there's a way of dealing with it being intimidated. Instead of getting overwhelmed, is like, okay, let's, one step at a time. Let me stand back and then work through this. But asking those things is really good because I think it's important for other people to know this as well. Well, how do you deal with it? What if it's a big, scary problem? What if you've never used that before? What do you do? So no, I think they're great questions, and yeah, I look forward to more of your episodes going forward.
I did masters in software engineering, also bachelors in computer science and engineering. Right now, I'm getting trained as AWS DevOps engineer. So, how talking with experts like you who are already in the industry, who solve different problems, who saw different kind of business problems, talking with experts like you, how this experience is going to be helpful for me if I work in IT and also as a DevOps engineer in coming days.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think there's a couple of things. One, you're more qualified than me. Like I don't have I don't have IT qualifications, so already with the degree and the masters, you're in a great place. You've got a great education, and I think it's valuable no matter which perspective you come from. Again, I found mine valuable because I brought different skills to the table, but you've actually got relevant experience from your studies. So I think that's great. And also I think what you're doing now, asking around, speaking to people is valuable too, because, whether you speak to me or other people, I notice you've spoken with lots of other, people, whether it be developers like me or architects or filmmakers. I noticed you spoke with lots of different people, but that's great because they've all got different experiences and different perspectives. And sometimes you learn like how technology can help them in their industry too. But also we'll all have different experiences, people in general. Even if I had 1 year, 10, 20 years, we'll all have different experiences. But also we can also share the mistakes we've made, things to avoid, things of, hey, I did it this way, but it didn't work. Or I took on a big project full on. I didn't break it down in smaller parts and it was too intimidating. Things like that can be valuable to say, well, what worked well, what didn't work well, and then you can learn from those experiences instead of making the mistakes yourself.
It's really valuable for me getting the feedback, also interviewing you and asking some questions and getting some answers and learning, also telling to my audience how you have solved problems and how you do things and how you made things possible. Thank you very much for giving your valuable time for my audience and for me, and also giving answers to some of my questions.
Oh, it's my pleasure. No, thanks for having me on. And I hope this has been useful for you and for your audience as well.
Definitely. Can I put this video on my YouTube channel with your permission?
Yes, please do.
Yeah. And also, can I put this audio and video clip on my podcast, website, internet, social media, everywhere with your permission?
Yes, of course, that's fine. And if you type me in, I'll like and share it as well. Hopefully, get help spread it amongst the audience.
Yeah, I'll share your web links in the description in this video. People who finds our video can see it, and also I'll put on the screen as well. Can you spell your social media presence or your websites to my podcast listeners?
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Keith Atherton. So that's KEITH ATHERTON. And most places like Twitter, LinkedIn, I'm active on many of those places. On Twitter, my handle is Mr. Keith Atherton.
Thank you, Keith. Keep going, keep inspiring people, and also keep educating the world.
Thanks, Sai. You too. Keep the channels going. I mean, it's really valuable. I've been a fan. I know many people follow you and your content. So yeah, please likewise keep your good work going as well.
Thank you, sir.
Great. Thanks now.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.